Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2013 Ford Explorer, we're going to be showing you how to install the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system. But before we do that, why don't we check it out and make sure that this is going to be the right setup for you. So before we get too in-depth talking about the braking system and how it works and everything like that, I figured it'd be beneficial just to kind of touch base and refresh yourselves on the main components that we're going to need to flat tow our Explorer down the road in the first place. The main components are going to consist of 5 different things. So first one being your base plate, and what that's going to do is provide us with a solid and reliable attachment point. That way we can hook our tow bar up. Tow bar is going to be the second component, and this is going to be the physical link that actually connects the front of your SUV to the back of your motorhome. Third main component is going to be safety cables, and these are pretty straightforward. These are there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. These are going to keep everything connected together. The fourth main component will be tow bar wiring, and what this is going to do is transfer the lighting functions from the back of your coach to the back of your Ford, keeping you safe and legal. And last but not least, the fifth main component will be a supplemental braking system, and what this is going to do is apply the brakes in your Explorer whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome, helping to bring you to a more complete and predictable stop. So when it comes to braking systems, you know, a lot of people don't really completely understand them, and that's definitely understandable. There's a lot of them out there, and all how they work are all a little bit different and everything else. And some of you may not even be familiar at all with the braking system. A lot of people have learned the hard way, where they try to, you know, get away without using one. I can see why. You know, they're not the cheapest component to pick up, but they're definitely well worth it. You know, especially on a car of this size. You know, it's not like you're pulling a little tiny smart car around behind you or something. The Explorer's got some weight to it. So what the supplemental braking system is going to do is apply the brakes in your Ford whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome. That way the motorhome isn't completely responsible for not only slowing itself down, but now a big SUV behind it too. And so it's just going to reduce the wear and, you know, general wear and tear, and it's going to shorten your stopping distance and just give you more confidence whenever you're driving down the road. I know, you know, whether you're pulling a trailer or a car like this, I mean, there's a lot going on, and anything that you can do to instill a little more confidence whenever you're going down the road is worth it, in my opinion. But with that said, you know, I mentioned there's a ton of different braking systems available, and so I'm just going to kind of go over a couple of them. Really, it's going to come down to if you want a permanent type system, one that's going to stay with the vehicle, or a portable type system, one that you can take out of the vehicle. The benefit to a permanent type system like the InvisiBrake is once it's in there, it's in there. It's super easy to hook up. I mean, you really don't need to do anything, honestly. With the InvisiBrake, you have to hook up this tether. So it goes right to the front of your car on a little clip here to the back of the hitch on your motorhome. I mean, super, super simple, right? So that's definitely one of the benefits to it. One of the benefits to a portable type system is the fact that you can pull it out and it's not really in the way. Not that this is, but it's not going to be, you know, attached to your car per se. So that might work real well for those of you that change your towed vehicle a lot, or if you plan on pulling a couple vehicles, you can get one braking system and kind of, you know, go back and forth between it. Or maybe, you know, if you're not really sure if you want to flat tow a whole lot, you might only go once or twice a year, that portable system, it might be a better option for you. But, you know, when it comes to picking that out, I'll kind of go in a little bit further here. One of the portable systems that I really like is the Blue Ox Patriot 3. It fits a lot of vehicles, super easy to use, and everything else. The permanent type systems, InvisiBrake, is definitely a reliable system. Once they're in, they're kind of tricky to get installed, but that's honestly every braking system. They're really reliable. The other ones that I really like are the Stay and Play Duo and the Stay and Play Air Force One. Air Force One is if your motorhome has air brakes. The Duo is if your motorhome has regular brakes. The InvisiBrake here is going to work regardless what type of motorhome you have. So you really, honestly, whatever one of those systems I just mentioned, if you go with any of those, I feel like you're going to be happy. And, you know, we've had a lot of success with all those in the past. The kit's also going to feature a safety device, which is this here. This is called the Breakaway switch, and that's what our tether is going to hook to. And that's there just in case, in the event of an unlikely disconnect, the pin would get pulled out of this. And when that happens, it's going to activate your vehicle's braking system. So that way it'll help kind of get things back under control and, you know, slow things down a little bit. So whenever you are driving your motorhome down the road, whenever you hit the brake in here, it's going to apply the brake in your Explorer. And with this kit, this is more or less like a preset amount of braking pressure that's going to be applied in the Explorer. And it's adjustable. So let's say, you know, usually you start out about, you know, at the recommended amount, that Roadmaster. I believe for the Explorer, it recommends starting about 60, 65 PSI on the operating unit. But that's going to vary depending on how you like it to feel, right? Or how big your motorhome is. If you have an itty bitty motorhome and a relatively large car, you might need to rely on the Explorer's brakes a little bit more, as opposed to if you have a huge motorhome, really large brakes, you know, the motorhome can take over a little bit more of the work. So you have some adjustability there. But whatever you have it set at, what happens is when you hit the brakes in here, it's going to activate the braking system, hit the brakes in the Explorer, and then obviously when you let off, it lets off, right? So you kind of know what to expect, which isn't a bad thing compared to some of the other types of systems like the Stay and Play Duo, for example. That one's a proportional type system. And so what that means is it's going to match the amount of braking pressure that you hit in the motorhome, right? So let's say if you're going up to a stoplight and you're halfway on the brake, Explorer's going to do the same thing. On the other hand, let's say if you come to an emergency stop and you really got to stand on the brake, Explorer's going to do the same thing. So that one's, you know, predictable as well. It kind of takes some of the guesswork, I guess you can say, out of it. But on the same note, it's all just really going to depend on what you want. You know, if you like the fact that you know what you have your braking system set at, you do it once, you know what to expect every single time. So kind of gives you that knowledge too, knowing this is what I should expect. If you don't feel that, you know, it's easier to diagnose an issue too. If something were to happen or anything like that, you go, man, something that just doesn't feel right. I need to check something out. Which brings me to my next point. They actually give you an indicator light, which in our case I have over here. So why don't we come on over and check that out. So this indicator light here, what this is going to do, whenever the brake pedal is pushed down and the braking system's working in your Explorer, so I'm going to hit the brake in the motorhome, the brake will be applied in the Explorer, you can see that red light comes on, and that's letting us know that, you know, everything's working and that brake pedal is being moved in the Explorer. So kind of real quick way just to, you know, take a peek down there. Okay, at least we know we have braking pressure and things are happening back there. It also has a buzzer in it. I'm not going to do it because really no need to. It's essentially letting you know something's wrong. If the brakes are applied for an extended period of time, I forget exactly what it is. I want to say it's 30 seconds. But so let's say if something happens back there and the Explorer's brakes are just locked up for whatever reason, this will stay lit up and then it'll start buzzing at you and letting you know, hey, something's going on back there. You need to check it out. So kind of a cool indicator there, and kind of keep you updated as you're going down the road. Just kind of wanted to show what this system actually looks like in the Explorer. So this is going to be inside underneath your driver's seat, so not really in the way of anything. And yeah, that's really about all there is to it. I kind of talked about adjusting it. This is how you would do it here. You got your little gauge there and a knob. You can dial it up or down, so super easy to get to. If you do ever want to mess with the adjustments or anything, I mean, it's right there. Not complicated at all. So decent design. and one that definitely works. But other than that, at the end of the day, a good, reliable braking system. You know, it works. Really, my least favorite thing about it is the install. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of a pain to get in, but I mean, a lot of braking systems are. There's just a lot to them, and good news is you only have to do it once, right? So once it's done, it's over with. It's gonna be super easy and straightforward from there on. But you know, honestly, set aside some time, take your time, and as long as you stay focused, you should be able to do this. So if you want to see how that's done, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and put this on together now. To begin our installation for our Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system, we're going to be here inside of our Explorer on the driver's side and our back seat. And what we're going to be doing is finding a spot to mount up your main operating unit. So we're going to be putting it underneath the seat like this, which is perfectly fine. And obviously you don't want to bolt it down or anything just yet. We want to get everything plugged in and kind of hooked up. That way it's a little bit easier to work, but which I've done. But one of the ways that we are going to secure this is we have a tab on each side of this. And what you can do is just cut a slit in the carpet, and then, you know, you'll slide that tab underneath there and then kind of straighten it back out. And that's all you really need to keep this thing from moving around. We are going to have some wires and things like that come off of the back of this unit. And they're simply just going to plug right in. The plugs and clips and everything are going to be different from one another. So pretty straightforward. Plug it in, plug it in. This one here is just an air line. So you'll have a little piece of tube. Just plug that right on in. Take your air line, plug the air line into the tube. Then you're going to have a bundle of real thin air line like this. And with this stuff, you want to cut it with like a razor. That's what I usually do. That way it's nice and straight. And this just plugs in as well. And this, since we're back here, we'll just get this out of the way. This is going to run to our cylinder, which we have underneath the seat. So this is a cylinder, and I mounted it sideways like this. There's a clamp that comes in the kit that kind of goes around the neck of that cylinder. And I just use a self-tapping screw to kind of run it down. You don't have to bury it into the metal or anything underneath. Just as long as you get a good bite on that carpet, it's pretty thick. I mean, it'll stop it from moving around. That small tube that we talked about, that just plugs into the fitting into the cylinder. And then you're going to have a cable, okay, that comes off of the cylinder. And that cable and all of our wiring that we had plugged into the operating unit is going to run towards the front of our vehicle and on the driver's side. So I kind of just have it running up right kind of underneath the carpet, where it'll eventually just come right out on the driver's side door threshold. So we're looking right underneath of our driver's seat, and I actually put some yellow tape on our wires and everything, make it a little easier to kind of spot, because everything's kind of buried. But so you can see where I poked a little hole in the carpet there and pushed all their wires through. You do pop off that little plastic threshold along the door jamb, and you can see where the yellow tape is. All of our wires in that airline tube ends up going through a grommet that we made in our floorboard to the bottom side of our vehicle, and we'll run them wires up in the engine compartment and everything else. But while we're in here, we might as well do the cable. So the cable is coming from that actuator cylinder, and that's going to run along the floorboard. And when you're running this, try not to put any big kinks or super sharp turns in that cable, because you obviously don't want it to kink up. But that runs to an anchor point, which you're going to anchor that to the floorboard. And the purpose of that is just to keep the cable straight and where you want it. You can secure it down with a couple self-tapping screws. From that anchor point, you're going to go up and you're going to have your pulley. All right, so that pulley is going to be secured to the firewall. And I secured ours essentially a couple inches below where our steering shaft goes through. It's kind of open there because obviously you don't want to drill into anything of importance through the firewall. But you're going to secure that pulley, and you want to be in line with your brake pedal arm. That way it pulls it nice and straight. And so that cable's going to come up around that pulley and go to a bracket on our brake pedal arm. And so that bracket is just going to bolt in place. You want to get it tight, and you want to position it in a manner whenever the brake pedal is going to be applied, it's going to pull straight. And so you'll feed your that cable end up through that bracket and tighten it down. The 2 screws are adjustment screws, and so you can kind of set the tension on the cable. You don't want that cable to be super tight nor super loose. I wish I could kind of get my hand in there and show you, but it's just so, everything's so tight. Essentially, when the brake pedal is resting like this, you want to be able to take that cable and kind of have some movement in it. You want to be able to move it just a little bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch, something like that. And that's how you'll set your tension. That way, you know, the unit pulls the brake pedal like it should, but it's not so tight that it's just pulling your brake pedal down whenever you're just driving around town and everything else like that. So underneath our vehicle, if you remember where I said I drilled out a hole, put a grommet in it, and ran our wires and stuff through, this is where it comes out. So I just drilled through, it's right there, floorboard, took a rubber grommet, put it in there, that way we don't have, you know, sharp metal tearing into our wires, and dropped them out. So I taped them up really good, give it some protection, put some silicone there where the hole is, and these are going to run just up through there, kind of along our firewall and up into the engine compartment. So now in the engine compartment, here's where our wires and everything come up. First thing we'll focus on is the green, yellow, brown, and white wire coming from our operating unit. So these are just going to tie into our existing diode wires, which are these here. So you had your existing diode wiring, cut that in half, strip back the insulation, and you're just going to go color for color. So here's our new green wire from our operating unit, existing diode wire, twist those ends together, put it in one end of the butt connector, crimp it down, and then complete the circuit with the other side of the existing diode wiring. Put that in, crimp it down. Same thing for yellow and brown, as well as white. With the white one though, you're going to add an extra wire. So grab maybe another foot of wire and double it up in both ends of the butt connector here. So, and this is just going to be a redundant ground, an extra ground. So this just runs down and comes up right over here. With that, I just crimped on a ring terminal. So that white wire, that redundant ground, that's just going to run up right through here. And there's actually a factory bolt. You pull it out with an 8mm socket. I crimped on a ring terminal to the end of the wire. Put the ring terminal, or put the bolt through the ring terminal and just simply tighten it back down. So now we can move on to the red wire as well as the black wire. So the red wire, this is going to get connected to a fuse holder and end up on your positive battery terminal. So here's the fuse holder. I crimped on a ring terminal. Other end of the red wire, I strip back. And to get the fuse holder onto the red wire, I'll strip back the insulation there. And we're going to take a butt connector. I'm using heat shrink butt connectors. They just offer a little more protection against corrosion. The ones that come in the kit will work fine, but if you'd rather upgrade to these, you can get them here at eTrailer. The way that works, you just put the bare end of the wire in, crimp it down. So I'm going to do it on this side too to pair everything together. And since the ends are heat shrink, we'll come back with our heat gun and seal them up. So with that now connected, we can get it on our positive battery, flip open our cover there, and we're going to connect it to that stud. So we'll take a 10mm socket and loosen this up. This nut isn't going to come completely off. It's just not really designed to, at least without damaging the threads. So you're just going to kind of back it off until it stops. And then we're going to cut a slice in our ring terminal, little opening there, like so. And then we're just going to sneak that underneath the bottom of the nut and tighten it down. And when you're doing this, make sure the fuse isn't in the fuse holder. That's the last thing that will eventually hook up. Just trying to position this a little bit better. Let's go ahead and get that tightened down. So like I said, there was that red wire we just hooked up and a black wire. That black wire just continues along the side of our battery here, where it loops around and gets connected to the negative side of our battery. So I did the same deal except without the fuse holder. I just crimped on a ring terminal, pulled off the nut with a 10mm, slid that ring terminal over and tightened it down. So now we can get our breakaway switch wire routed, and that's just going to be the thick black wire. So just like the other ones, comes right down along through here, and run that down to the front of our vehicle. This is going to go to our breakaway switch. So that simply just kind of drops right down, and comes out right here. I just ran it down kind of behind her bumper over to our breakaway switch. And this is just a connector like that. You can put some dielectric grease on it if you want and tape it up once everything is connected and whatnot. But so that just plugs into the breakaway switch, and the breakaway switch is this component here. And what I've done is just took a bracket, kind of made a C shape, clamped it around our base plate, and then just secured our breakaway switch to that bracket using a nut and a bolt. So at this point, during our braking system install, we can worry about the indicator light wiring. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. All right, one of them being you can take this big bundle of wire here. It's going to have an end like this. You can run this, this end will be at the back of your motorhome by the hitch, and you can run the other end all the way up to the front of your RV where the indicator light will tie into. You'll have another smaller bundle of wire like this with one end on it, and you can run that down here to the front and then use their little tether here that they give you to plug the front of your car into the back of your motorhome. You know, that's perfectly fine. It's a lot of work though that could potentially not have to be done. A lot of late model motorhomes, if they have a factory 7-way already equipped, 9 times out of 10, there's what's called a brake controller plug under the dash, especially on like Fords, for example. A lot of the Ford chassis have it. A lot of the other ones do too. But what we're going to do is utilize that brake controller plug. We're going to use the electric brake output wiring in the motorhome to hook up our indicator light to. And since it's already in there from the factory, that wire is already going to be ran all the way back to the back of our motorhome at the 7-way. And to eliminate using that tether and run all this extra wiring, we're just going to take the indicator light wire on our car side and run that into our 6-way connector electric brake terminal. And then whenever we just use our big cable to plug in, that'll already be integrated. It's really a nice setup. So that's what I'm going to do. With that said, you probably want to do this at the same time you're doing your diode wiring and like a charge line if you have one. That's what this wiring is right here. So yeah, I took one end of our wire here and ran it up through here. And we're going to strip the insulation back a little bit. About like that. Give that a good twist. And this terminal here, it's going to be labeled S. That's the one that we're going to be using. So back out the set screw. Place that wire inside. And simply tighten it back down. Now, we are going to have our nylon air tube here remaining. This is going to get connected into our Explorer's vacuum system. And I pulled it out, kind of started putting it together. This piece is going to plug into your brake booster, so you can pull that out of it. And this piece, there's a clamp you can undo. That goes to your intake manifold. I recommend just pulling this off because, I mean, just hardly any room to work. So I kind of started putting it together. I saved a couple fittings, or a couple things though that I'll show you how to do. So let's just go over to the bench and put it the rest of the way together. All right, so what we're going to be adding is a check valve and this T-fitting. So originally this piece, you can see this piece of plastic tubing there that was connected to that one, right? And I cut that in half. The end of this tube, I heated up a little bit with a heat gun. You can probably use a hairdryer too, honestly. And I took the check valve, and you want the black side of the check valve to plug into that. So you can push it in there, and once this cools, it seals up really nice. Black side of the check valve goes in, like I said, so that'll be the side facing the engine. The other end of the check valve, I just took a piece of tubing, vacuum line, cut maybe an inch or two of it out, and took our T-fitting, pushed in one fitting into there. And since these are all barbed fittings, they keep really well. But what I'm going to do now is get this piece over here. And so you can see, if you just try to do this without heating it or anything, it's extremely difficult. But if we warm it up some, and don't take much heat, you just want to get some heat in there. You don't want to melt through this or anything like that. Get some heat in there, it makes it a little more malleable. And we should be able to kind of push this in place. You might have to, it's still pretty tight, might have to get a little more heat in it, but you get the idea. It'll go on and go over that barbed fitting there. So once you have it pushed on there, give it a minute to kind of cool down, and it'll seal up really nice. So once that's set up how you want it, you're going to take this I don't know, a few inch piece of tubing, comes with the kit. That's going to go on this portion of the T-fitting. And with this prepped, what I'll do now is just get this all hooked back up, and I'll show you what it looks like once we're done. So I got everything reconnected, and this is what it looks like. So if you remember that last piece of tubing that we hooked up to our T-fitting, I took our nylon air tube that we ran in here, cut it to length, and that simply just plugs right into the end of that nylon air tube, or I'm sorry, the nylon air tube simply just plugs right into the end of that tube that we put on our T-fitting. And lastly, the very last thing that we got to do, if you remember, when we ran our wire to the front of our vehicle into the 6-way for the indicator light, we actually need to hook that up to the cold side of our brake light switch. So That wire came in through the floor, through that grommet that we used for everything else. This is the wire here. And in our case, since we're using a brake light relay, we're just going to tap right into that. I do suggest using a brake light relay because on these cars, if you don't have one when you're towing it, your brake lights will override your turn signals. So you can find this here at etrailer if you want to use one. But with that said, the way that I did it is I just tapped into our brake light relay here, the blue wire. This is the side that goes closest to our brake light switch. And I just doubled up our wire from the indicator light, or it comes from the 6-way in the front, one into the butt connector, and then completed the circuit again. If you're not going to be using a brake light relay for whatever reason, you would just tap that wire into your brake light switch, into the brake light switch. In our case, the color of that wire, factory wire, was purple with a white stripe. And I believe, generally speaking, the majority of Fords are all like that. So that's how you would do it if you're not going to be using the brake light relay. So now that we're done with the vehicle side, we can move into the motorhome side. We just need to rig up that indicator light. In our case, I mean, you put it pretty much wherever you want. I put ours down here in the corner where you can see it, but it's not, directly in front of you. You won't be staring at it as you're going down the road. So once you find that spot where you want it, obviously it needs to be clear behind it, but you're going to drill out a hole a little bit smaller than the diameter of the indicator light. So the hole's drilled, you put your sticker on if you want it there, and then you're just going to take the light and feed it through. And once you kind of push it through, it'll kind of lock itself into place. There'll be a couple of wires coming off the back, and we need to get those hooked up. So underneath the dash, this is where we're going to make our connections. Now bear with us here because it's just so tight in here and really difficult to get our equipment up here and give you guys a really good image of this. But essentially what you're going to do, you're going to have a skinny red and a skinny white wire coming off of the indicator light. There's also going to be a buzzer looking deal with the same color wires. You're going to twist them together, color for color. And then I just simply extended the wires with one large wire. So we have a white wire and a red wire, and that's going to tie into our brake controller plug. So every motorhome is going to be a little bit different. In our case, with the Fords, usually they're kind of like right behind the steering wheel column. But what you're going to do is the white wire is going to be your ground. So you're going to tap into the white wire there on your brake controller plug, and the red wire needs to be tied into the blue wire on our brake controller plug. Since that's how we wired it up at the front of our vehicle, that's what's going to send the signal up into the indicator light. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster InvisiBrake supplemental braking system on our 2013 Ford Explorer.